Hello guys, in this video I will explain the concepts related to isolation and durability. Okay, in this video we will learn isolation and the durability. Okay, in these concepts mainly I will explain isolation anomalies and isolation levels. First we will go for isolation anomalies and isolation levels. First we will talk about levels. There are mainly four types of levels. Okay, isolation levels. The first one is read uncommitted. Read uncommitted. Second one is the read committed. Read committed. Okay. Third one is the repeatable reads. Repeatable reads. Fourth one is the serializable. Serializable. So in MySQL, repeatable reads are the default one. Okay, repeatable read is the default one. Okay, well, coming to the isolation anomalies. Well, coming to the isolation anomalies. Basically, there are mainly four types of isolation anomalies. First one is the dirty reads. Okay, first one is the dirty reads. Second one is the phantom reads. Phantom reads. Third one is the non-repeatable reads. Non-repeatable reads. And the final one, the fourth one is the last updates. Okay, first we will talk about isolation. Okay, first we will go for 30 reads. 30 reads. Okay, 30 reads means, for example, when happening the two transactions at a time, one can update the data without committing, the other person can see the data. So this leads to the 30 reads. What happens means, for example, the first transaction doing the transaction and update the data and roll back happens. What happens means, the balance, for example 20,000, he will update the balance to 30,000. Then somewhere in the statements there will be any failure of the commands, it will roll back to the 20,000. Now if the second transaction also happening at the same time, before updating the data it was 20,000, after updating it was 30,000. Now the second transaction will read the data 30,000, then he can commit the transaction, then it will lead to the problem for the 30 reads. Okay, I will show you the practically. For that I will create the users table and balances table. Okay, our account holders. First of all, create the table users edit. Okay, auto increment. Okay, name 20, not on constraint. The engine is InnoDB engine. Okay, I created a table, and also I will create the table of account holders. Account holders ID, primary key, auto increment, account holder, partner, and balance. Balance will be decimal. We'll check the constant. Balance greater than 0. Okay, I created two tables. One is users and second one is the account holders. For example, first I will insert the data into the users. Into users name, values, Ravi, Raju. Okay. I will insert the data into the users table. If I select it, if I see the data into the users table, there is a Ravi and Raju. Now I will see the data into the account holders table. Insert into account holders, account holder ID, account holder and values. Values. For first one, 50,000. For second one, 40,000. Okay. Now I inserted. Now if I see the account holders table, start from account holders. Okay. Now data is there. Now first I will talk about dirty reads. So dirty reads means okay. Dirty reads means someone can update the data and without committing some other transaction will see the data. Okay. So before going to dirty reads, I will explain the transaction levels. I already told you, right? There are mainly four types of transaction levels: read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable read, and serializable. So by default, the MySQL is the repeatable read. For that, we need to use the command select at the rate transaction level. So here it will show the transaction level, which is repeatable read, transaction isolation. Okay. Now let's talk about the dirty reads. Okay. Dirty reads mainly, for example, there are two transactions. If one transaction without committing, the another transaction can read the data which is not committed by the previous transaction. Okay. And the second one we will discuss about the phantom reads. Okay. Phantom reads. Phantom reads means different results on subsequent read. Okay. Basically, this can happen if another transactions insert the data into the table. For example, there are two transactions happening. First transactions, it is reading the data. Now what happens means the second transaction inserting the data into the table. Then in the first transactions, if it will read the data, it will get the different results. Okay. For the different results on subsequent requests. Okay. Different results on subsequent requests. Actually, this can happen if another transactions insert the data into the table. Okay. This can happen because if the in the transaction inserts the data into table. Okay. This is the phantom reads. The third one is the non-repeatable read. Non-repeatable reads. Okay. Repeatable reads. Here non-repeatable reads means it can read the same data twice and get different results. Okay, for example, there are two transactions. First transactions, it is actually reading the data. Now what happens means, to second transactions, this the transaction can modify the data. Then in the first transactions, if somewhere again he will select that he uses the same command, then then the different results for the same query. So this is the non-repeatable reads. Mainly, it can read the same data twice, and get the different results. Okay, this is the non-repeatable reads. Mainly, this can happen if another transactions modifies the data between the two reads. Okay, this can happen. This can happen if some other transaction modifies the data between two reads. Okay, now the last one anomaly is last updates. Last updates means it occurs when two or more transactions access and modify the same data concurrently. For example, I told you right, the what is a concurrent access? When multiple people booking the same ticket at the same time. So the last updates means if we can handle the concurrent access, the last updates will occur. Okay, these are the main four things. And also I want to tell about the MVCC, which is main important thing. So MVCC is the multi-version concurrence control. Okay, it is mainly for the motive is it will not block for the readers and writers at a time. Okay, it will not block the readers and writers. So if you use the InnoDB engine, it by default the MVCC is set to true. Okay. Then we will talk about the durability. Okay, we will talk about the durability. Basically, it is achieved through the redo logs. Okay, what happens means if you run the transaction, suddenly the system failures. What happens means if the transaction is committing, there is no problem. What happens means it uses the val. Okay, val means write ahead logging. Write ahead logging. So basically, val uses the ARES algorithm. It uses the ARES. ARES means algorithm for recovery and isolation, extracting semantics. So basically, it is a specific and widely used algorithm for mainly for the database recovery. It is like almost advanced algorithm, and mainly the durability can achieve through the redo files. I already shown you in the previous video. If you open the data directory session variables, if you change the directory, if you see the list of files, there is a file called redo file. In that file, the whatever the after committing transactions, the details are there. What happens means before writing the data into the disk, the data is stored into the redo files. Okay, that is the main thing. These are the concepts I covered. Okay, I hope you understand well. These are the things I want to tell you in this series. Okay, thank you.